Good morning, friends. Today we're going to be canning Chipotle beef that we can use for tacos, enchiladas, burritos, whatever you like. And I'm going to put the complete list of ingredients in the description box down below. This is a raw pack method, but it's done a little differently than the other raw packs that I've shown you. I'm going to mix the beef in a bowl with the spices and the onions and then we'll pack everything into jars at that point, and we'll add a little broth to fill the jars to 1-inch headspace, and then we'll process everything in our canner. So let's get started. I was able to catch a good sale on chuck roast at my local store for $3.99 a pound. I have a couple of onions here, loosely chopped. Instead of salt, I'm going to use a Sazon Mexican style seasoning. And instead of, we're going to put some Mexican oregano additionally. We're going to be using chipotle peppers. Now, if you don't have a can of chipotle peppers on hand, you can use chipotle chili pepper powdered. That's a good, comparable seasoning. You could use chili powder, but it really, I think, would make a difference too if you have this to get the chipotle peppers in adobo sauce. This is what the recipe calls for. But like I'm saying, if you're far away from the store or you need to use a substitution, you could use dried chili powder. And then instead of cilantro, I have family members who can't tolerate cilantro. To them, it tastes like soap. So I'm going to just use a little parsley. It doesn't have the flavor of cilantro, but it should do in a pinch. And I'm going to be using some minced garlic. I'm going to use this pint of beef broth that I have on hand that I canned a few months ago. So this recipe is loosely based upon the ball recipe for chipotle chili. It is, as I mentioned earlier, a raw pack method, and this differs from the other raw packs that you may have seen me do in that we are going to mix all the ingredients up and then load our jars. So for my dry ingredients, I've got about 2 tablespoons of Sazon seasoning. I've got about a tablespoon of Mexican oregano. And I've got about a tablespoon of parsley. As I said, you can use cilantro if your family is okay with that. So there we have the dry ingredients. Next, we're going to add, the recipe calls for 8 cloves of garlic chopped, but I'm going to use about 1.5 tablespoons of minced garlic from my jar in the refrigerator. We're going to add a cup of onions. I have decrease the amount of onions that the original ball recipe calls for because I've made it like that with 2 cups of onion and just about 1/2 pound of beef per jar, and I thought it was way too much onion and not enough beef. So I'm going to reduce the onion and increase the beef a bit. And we've got 4, well actually it's more like 5 or 6 chopped chipotle chilies. They're in adobo sauce. We want that good sauce also, so I've chopped these up. It's not the whole can. I used 1/2 of a can last night for another project. So there we go. And the adobo sauce gives us a really nice, in addition to the chipotle peppers, which are smoked, the adobo sauce also has a really good smoked flavor. So let's mix all this up. Get this all nice and mixed. And boy, this smells really good already. And I will also tell you that chipotle peppers are not particularly hot. They're considered pretty mild. But if you don't like any heat, you could certainly substitute a tablespoon of regular dried chili powder, or I also have a dried chipotle chili powder that you could use that as well if you don't have this can of chipotle peppers and adobo on hand. This is going to give the meat a really wonderful flavor. This meat you can use for tacos, enchiladas, burritos, anything like that. It's going to be great. Okay, so we've got our spices in the bowl. Now let's add our beef. Like I said, this is about 3 pounds of beef. Now we're going to get this all mixed up together. I probably should be using a bigger spoon. want to get the meat all nice and coated with the spices and the adobo and the chili peppers. Okay, so I've mixed this for a minute or two. Everything looks pretty well distributed. Now it's time to fill our jars. And I almost forgot to add a little bit of salt. I put about a tablespoon of salt in here. There is some salt in the Sazon seasoning, but not a lot. So I added a little bit more, just my Himalayan pink salt. Now the nice thing about this recipe, being raw packed, you don't have to worry about warming your jars before you can it. You're going to just fill the jars at room temperature. Your product here is at room temperature, or a little bit colder because it is out of the fridge recently. But we don't have to pre-warm our jars or pre-sterilize them. Alrighty, so we have our 4-pint jars. I've cleaned these real well. I've checked the rims to make sure there's no pits, chips, cracks, anything like that. We're going to use our funnel and we're going to start filling. Like I said, the original ball recipe only calls for 1/2 pound of beef per jar. And I have made it that way in the past, and I don't find that, it was not enough beef and a little too much liquid in there. And I'd prefer to have a little more beef for my tacos or whatever I'm fixing. I would say, 1/2 pound of meat is not that much. It's not really enough for a meal, even for 2 people. Okay, so there's the first jar. We want to fill this and leave about 1 inch of headspace. Smells so good, guys. I wish you could smell this. The nice thing about this Sazon seasoning, it's got all your assorted flavors for Mexican food or Hispanic food. It's got cumin, it's got Mexican oregano, a lot of other nice ingredients. It's got, a little bit of garlic and onion powder and that kind of stuff, a little bit of salt. Gives a good flavor to a dish like this. Okay, so there we've got 2 jars. I'm using this darn little spoon, and I can only get like 1 piece at a time. But it's an after dinner canning session, so my brain is not functioning quite right, I guess. After a long day. Okay, maybe fit another hunk in there. Alrighty. Okay, I went out to the garage and I got another, I believe this is a squatty pint. Yeah, 500 ml. So I think I have enough here to do 5 pints. I'm going to have to rob from some of these overly full ones to fill this squatty pint here. I like these squatty pints. They're very attractive for gift giving. And I don't know if I'll be gift giving this dish, but possibly. So I did buy about 3.5 pounds of chuck. And that was too much for just 4 jars. So I would say if you had about 3 pounds, that'd be about right. 2 pounds was not enough. See here, we've got this a little over 3 pounds, and it's going to do these 5 pints very nicely. We're going to clean the rims, get this last little bit of onion in here and spices, and get these into the canner. The minimum load that you want to do when you're pressure canning is either 4 pints or 2 quarts. You don't want to do fewer than that in a load because you won't have the proper mass in your canner to have the cool down period that you need to effectively can. Let's see. Oh gosh, yeah, that's about right. I need a trying to distribute everything fairly evenly. Now we're going to add a little broth or water. I'm going to be using water today, not broth, to just make sure that we don't have air pockets down in our jars. So let's get a little bit. I don't think we're going to need much. A little bit of liquid in each jar. I'm going to use a little spatula that I have here for debubbling. Normally when you raw pack meat, you don't need to add any liquid or do any debubbling, but I do have a considerable amount of onion in this. And you know, it might be good to make this as a raw pack and just use powdered onion so you don't have that issue. But I didn't do that this time. Okay. But the ball recipe that I base this on does call for broth, and to bring it up to the appropriate 1 inch of headspace for each jar. And I like to go around the edge of the top of the jar and get any kind of spices or whatever that might have come up there, because I have had a little piece of spice, like a little chip of garlic, go up and interfere with my seal. And you don't want that to happen. Okay, so we're debubbled pretty well. We might need a little bit more water, not much. That's the hardest part for me about these recipes, is getting the proportions of your ingredients right. Now we're going to clean off the threads and the rims of each and every jar. Next, our lids and rings. Well, we've got our 5 pints here of delicious Chipotle beef ready to go into the canner. I've left about 1 inch of headspace, which is bringing liquid to just below the bottom ring there, or the bottom of the ring. Same with this one, it's right about here. You want to get your headspace right, If you have too much liquid in here, it'll tend to siphon out when it's boiling in the canner. If you have too little, you'll have too much airspace in there at the end of the process, and that might make your food not shelf stable. So we've got our lids on finger tight, which means tight but not cranked on there real tight. Just reasonably snug, I would say, and that's what they call finger tight. We're going to put these right into the canner. The canner has my particular brand of canner, the Presto 16 quart, calls for 3 quarts of liquid in the bottom. So I've got my 3 quarts of water in there. It's just room temperature. And a couple more here. Like I said, these are not hot, so I don't have to worry about handling them at this point. Okay, so we have our 5 pints. This recipe calls for 75 minutes of cooking time for pints. So what I'm going to do is make sure my lid is ready to go. Make sure I can see daylight through that vent hole, which means it's not plugged up. We want to make sure our little overpressure plug is good there. And we want to just check that our lock valve floats freely. We are going to line up the arrows. There's an arrow on my lid and an arrow on this handle here for this particular model of Presto. It's a pretty common model. I got mine at Walmart, less than $100. I've checked my gasket also inside to make sure that it's in place. And once you get the arrows lined up, the lid just falls into place. Next, you use the handles to just tighten the lid on there. Then I'm going to put my heat on. I haven't turned the heat on at this point. So we'll get this on. I never put anything at high heat. I leave it pretty close to where I'm leaving it for canning. I'm going to start this at 7, and I'm eventually going to go down to about 5.5 for my burner. That's my sweet spot, as they say. So I'm going to let this come up to temperature. We're going to wait until we see a plume of steam rising from this vent. And once it's really coming out really strongly like a locomotive, we'll set a timer for 10 minutes, and we're going to let it steam like that for 10 minutes. After the 10 minutes is up, I'm going to put on my weight. And for my elevation, I use a 10-pound weight. Yours may vary depending on your altitude, but the timing of the processing time will remain the same no matter what your altitude. So we're going to put on the weight after this is steamed for 10 minutes, and then once the weight starts to gently rock, we're going to set a timer for 75 minutes. And when the processing time of 75 minutes is completed, I will turn off the heat and I will let this depressurize naturally, which takes usually about an hour. And you don't want to hurry any of this process. Like I said, you don't want to crank the heat up real high and turn it down real low, up real high. You want to keep it pretty even and consistent. If you do that, you'll have less chance of the food bubbling up and siphoning out of your jars. And since I have learned patience, I have had very little problem with siphoning. So this is my 10-pound weight. It doesn't mean that this weight is 10 pounds, but it means when this weight is over the vent, when the pressure inside the canner builds up to more than 10 pounds, the pressure inside will cause the steam to come out, and this will start to rock. So you want this to rock steadily for 75 minutes while this is processing. And then once your 75 minutes is up, the heat goes off, you let it depressurize naturally, and then we'll come back to take out our product. Delicious Chipotle beef. And this stuff smells so good when it's cooking. I can't even describe it to you. It's just delicious. This is a really good recipe. Here is the vent with a strong plume of steam, and I have set my timer for 10 minutes. So we're going to let this steam like this for 10 minutes. When the 10 minutes is up, we'll put the weight on. Okay, our 10 minutes is up. It's been steaming like that for 10 minutes. We're going to put the weight on. And now, you'll see usually that lock will pop up pretty quickly after I put the weight on there. That means the pressure is building inside the canner. So as soon as the pressure inside reaches the 10 pounds, this will start to rock. And once the rocking starts, we'll set a timer again for an hour and 15 minutes or 75 minutes. So we'll come back when this begins to rock and set our timer. And I have left this at this same heat level, but I'm going to turn it down just very slightly. And that's probably about where I'm going to leave it for the rest of the processing time. I may turn it down a little tiny bit more, but that's usually about a good level for me. And you'll learn with your stove what level you need to keep your heat at. Well, the suspense is building. It has been about 20 minutes since I put this weight on, and I think it's about to start rocking here any minute now. You can see the steam escaping. It really takes a long time for this process, guys. You have to really be patient. And there we go. Just getting ready to start rocking. Starting to move so slightly. Okay, so now we know we have reached our 10 pounds of pressure inside the canner. I can set my timer for 75 minutes. Yay! Took 20 minutes to get here. Okay, so we'll set our timer for 75 minutes. If it was coarse, we would set it for 90 minutes. Okay, 75 minutes. We'll come back and turn this off. It has to rock steadily like this for the whole 75 minutes. If you turn your heat down too low and it stops rocking, you have to start your timing all over from the beginning again. All right, our processing time is finished. The pin has dropped. Safe to remove this. And we're going to crack open the lid here and just let this sit for another few minutes. And we'll be right back. Smells super good. Looks like I had a little bit of siphoning. There's a little bit of discoloration to the water, but not too bad. Okay, so we'll let these continue to cool and we'll be back later. And I have washed all these jars in hot soapy water with particular attention to this area here on the threads where the rings screw on. And of course we are double checking our seals every time we handle the jars to make sure they've sealed. They've all sealed wonderfully well, so no issue with that. We also want to mark on the lids what the product is, the date that we canned it, and I pressure canned for 75 minutes. And that's just so I'll know when I go look at this on the shelf a year or two down the road, I'll know exactly what I did and I won't have to worry about it. Now you want to take the rings, dry them thoroughly, and put them away in a cool, dry place. When I was a new canner, a newbie, I didn't realize that. I put my rings in the dishwasher, and the corrosive detergent and the extended wash time really rusted my rings. So don't ever put them in the dishwasher. Hand wash them, put them away right away. We'll just reheat this. And let's see how tender this is. Fork tender. I'm going to be able to shred this up pretty nicely. Bear in mind I'm doing it with one hand. But yeah, I think we're going to have some excellent tacos tonight.